you don't have any goals, you don't have any structures in place, make sure that you have intention and you know where you want to be. Because like I said, when you put those goals in front of you, or maybe you make a hire to try and hit your goals, out of necessity, you're going to grow a lot quicker, right?
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. My name's David Knack, Director of Sales and Partnerships with Ava, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who have impressive resumes and have earned a lot of respect. So I thought it would be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of their biggest mistakes they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business.
Welcome back to another episode of Home Care Hindsight. I'm joined with me today by Justin Currie, who's the owner and CEO of recently rebranded Thema Home Care, and also founder of Masters of Home Care. Justin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, David. Super excited to be here.
Yeah. Justin, one of my things that I like about you is you live in Philadelphia. You sound enough like a Philadelphian, and then occasionally your Canadian accent will just come out in spades, and it's really exciting for me to hear.
It's a rare mixture.
I have the same problem, but with very specific words, a Southern accent will come out, and listeners of this show will, from time to time, just get hit with insane whiplash. Justin, for people who aren't familiar with your work, how would you introduce yourself?
So basically, I've owned a home care agency for about 7 years now in Pennsylvania. I owned a business up in Canada before I ever started my home care agency. We've seen a lot of success in the home care agency. We hit the Inc. 5000 list this year, which we're super excited about. And, I just kind of started sharing my story on TikTok, actually, and just trying to kind of help out other owners. And that evolved into Masters of Home Care. A lot of people started reaching out to me and were interested in, how to scale their agencies. They were missing something in their agency that they needed, guidance with somebody who had been there before. And so I started talking to a few people, and ultimately I have Thema to a place where it kind of runs on its own now. I'm still involved in it, but not at the level I was before. So that really allowed me to take a step back and start Masters of Home Care. And that's a real big passion of mine. I love business, and I love talking business with other owners, and I love being able to help out with, strategies and some of the systems that we're using. And that's where my passion lies, and I'm super excited about it.
Well, that's a huge accomplishment to get to the point where you've got a business that doesn't need you in it every single day in order for it to stay moving in the right direction. What are the fun things that I wish I could do, but I didn't have more time before? Well, now I've got some time. So that's really great. As you know, and as listeners of this show will find out or would know, I get tired of small talk quickly. And all I want is to say, hey, what kind of person are you? And you normally can't do that, but I'm on a podcast. I get to do what I want. And so in order to ask you, what kind of person are you? I want to know about the weird food combination that you love, but that other people find horrible.
This is also probably very Canadian of me, as we have ketchup chips in Canada. And I know there is some, in the US, there is some ketchup chips I've seen, but it's pretty rare here. But we kind of took it one step further. And I don't know how we started this when we were kids, but we took Ripple chips, which were basically, they're plain chips. And we used to dip them in Heinz ketchup. And it was delicious. And I still hold that today.
Yeah. Are those all dressed chips? Is that what you guys call those?
We do have all dressed, yeah.
Okay. I've found those lately, and they're tremendous, but I've not taken regular potato chips and pretended that they were French fries before in my life.
Yeah. Well, you got to try it out. I recommend it.
Okay. All right. I'll put that on the list for this weekend. So, Justin, you're somebody who's built a home care agency, and you've had enough success there. Inc. 5000 list is nothing to sneeze at. And now you're running a consulting practice. So you've accomplished a lot, but we're not here to talk about any of that today. Instead, I bring people on this show to talk about the big mistake that they've made in their career and all the stuff that they learned from that. And so, Justin, what's your big mistake?
Yeah, well, first off, there's no shortage of mistakes as you're starting a business, but I would say the biggest game changer for me was when I first started my agency, I tried to take care of everyone, right? I wanted Medicaid, VA, private pay, LTC. I was really going after anyone that was coming in the door. And I would say the biggest mistake was ultimately not being prepared to work with government payers, is most notably Medicaid. There's obviously, you get into cash flow issues and things like that if you're not well prepared, but also due to like extreme billing complexities, over compliance. I believe we lost about $30,000 of unpaid Medicaid services our first year, which was instrumental. It was monumental at that point of the agency. And that really opened my eyes of, do I want to just focus all of my attention outside and just work on private pay clientele? And ultimately, yeah, we made a huge change because of that. And, we really haven't looked back. And compliance and regulation, it's great up until a certain point. But unfortunately, that point's been crossed and now it's become extremely inefficient, right? So I think we're going to see a restructuring in some of the government programs, which would be fantastic. But yeah, that was a big mistake of mine. I know a lot of people work with government payers and that's great, but that was one that didn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, in first year in business, give people a sense of $30,000. If you're doing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million of revenue, $30,000 is never going to be a small amount of money. But in the first year of business, like how significant of a loss was that for you all?
Extremely. And the biggest part is that I was fully expecting that revenue throughout the year, right? So I was spending accordingly, I was budgeting accordingly to that revenue. And so it was a kind of thing that was like, how are we going to keep the doors open here for the next few months, right? So luckily we got over it quickly and we just cut our losses and we moved forward in a different direction. But yeah, it really hit the business hard that first year.
Yeah. And I mean, what was the conversation like? Because starting with, let's call it 3 third-party payer sources, Medicaid, VA, long-term care insurance. And then it sounds like where you guys have ended up now is that you're all in on, is that right?
We are. So we actually do diversify a little bit. And, our main target is private pay. We're always going after private pay, but we do serve VA clients and a little bit of long-term care insurance as well, but we don't actively market for it. It's not our target when we're out marketing, doing sales and marketing. But it is smart to diversify a little bit. It's just like a stock portfolio. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Sure. And so tell me a little bit about what that decision-making process was internally to, instead of focusing on 4 things all at the same time, what were the conversations like? How did you guys go about making the decision to pivot in that significant way?
Well, for one, I mean, we looked at the data. I'm a huge numbers guy, right? I owned a business before my home care agency, and numbers are really, really important to me. I know Stephen Tweed, he always preaches, to measure everything and look at that data. And that's what we did. And we found out the profitability of different payer sources. We looked at, the lifetime value of our different clients, but also how many office resources it's taking on the back end, right? Like obviously with billing complexities with insurance providers, it really can suck the life out of your office. You need people dedicated to do that. Whereas private pay, we have it all automated. We have no problems with cash flow or anything like that. So you can pretty much automate that whole process and have them set up on auto pay. So you can spend all of those time and resources somewhere else. So that's probably the number one reason. And that's how the internal conversation went, is that we looked at the data and we made decisions accordingly.
Yeah. I think what's interesting to me about this is like, there doesn't seem to be, and I'm kind of a novice at these things, but there doesn't seem to be a good way to automate the billing and accounts receivable process for Medicaid. Is that right?
Not that I've found, for sure. And I'm going to let all the listeners in on a little tidbit here on my situation. My situation was unique. I came down from Canada. I am still not a US citizen. I'm here on an investor visa. And so interestingly enough, when I've been running my agency, I was almost forced to improve my cash flow and improve my payment terms and find a way to make it work, because I still to this day can't get funding for my business because I'm a non-US citizen. So I've actually ran my business 100% debt-free for all 7 of these years. And it wasn't because I'm like some financial genius. It was out of absolute necessity. So we found ways to automate that and make sure that we were collecting that cash up front. And it's been huge help for the health of the agency. But that's kind of why it was out of necessity.
That's really interesting. From your perspective, what are the steps you've taken to automate your billing process? And some of this may be secret sauce, so feel free to tell me some of it's behind the paywall. But what are the steps that you've done that you see that are missing in a lot of agencies? Because I don't hear many people say that their billing processes are fully automated.
Yeah, well, I would say it depends on who you're working with, right? Like your payer sources, you're not going to see the same thing with Medicaid. VA has improved a great deal in that sense. We're seeing just a 2-week turnaround in general. We know when the funds are coming in. So that's been a really great process to work with. But yeah, some of the things we did as far as, and it's not really secret sauce, it's just doing things a little bit differently, is we're collecting money up front, and it's not a deposit, it's a startup fee. So that's been helpful with cash flow, obviously, for especially when you're going through those growth periods. We bill on a weekly basis, so we're sending out invoices every Monday. But what we do is we have them sign in the agreement and put their payment information and everything in there, and we have them sign up at the time of filling out the contract and everything. They're signing up for autopay and they're confirming autopay, and we get a few objections to that, not a lot, but we have kind of a system in place where we have the team trained to be able to respond to those objections when they happen. And as of right now, as far as our private pay clients go, I believe there's actually only one that's not, and she's been with us for like 3 years or 4 years. And she's the only one that's not on that auto pay. And we actually apply that every Thursday. So invoice goes out Monday, we apply the auto pay on Thursday. So we don't run into any cash flow issues.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is for the industry, setting people up on auto pay is very different from what most businesses are doing. But most consumers, it's their first time making a purchase decision about home care. And so as long as your team's equipped to have those conversations and explain the why behind it and make it clear that here's what to expect, and it's really clear and transparent and predictable, though that's different from what a lot of people in the industry are doing, like it's probably not that hard of a sell for your clients.
It's not at all. And once you start, when you have your marketing strategy dialed in, you have the right people coming to you as well, right? So your referral sources know who to send to you. So we rarely have, we have a $2,000 startup fee. That's our minimum startup fee. And we rarely have anybody complain about that. They sign on, they're happy to be with us because we have a good referral sources. There's a lot of trust built up there, but also we're providing a lot more off the start as well. But yeah, just implementing some things like that we saw were kind of a traditional gap in the industry have been super, super helpful. And like I said, some of it came from necessity, but also you just want to have that healthy business. I think 82% or something of small businesses fail because of cash flow issues. So I don't think people put enough emphasis on that.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me. I think often, and especially in home care, where most people get into it because of a personal reason, there's a why behind their story. They didn't just want to come in and make money. They have a family story or something that is the reason they got into home care in the first place. And what I find is that in a lot of entrepreneurial ventures, period, but especially when you don't come from like a entrepreneur background, billing is the last thing that you think about. You think about, I want to create a great quality service. I want to make sure that, my caregivers feel supported, that my clients have a great experience. And then I guess I'll get to billing later. I find that billing, transparency around it, predictability around it, having it on a schedule to where people always know what to expect is one of the easiest ways to avoid those uncomfortable, irate conversations with clients that can happen if billing is not exactly what you said it was going to be in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can solve a lot of those problems right off the start, right? Obviously, with insurance payers, you're a little bit limited to their system. But with private pay, you can have all those problems dealt with immediately.
Well, and I guess the other side of that coin in private pay is your billing can be as dysfunctional as you want it to be. So you guys have sound like you've built it into a systematized, operationalized process. And it sounds like that's been a huge boon to your business.
We have. It's been super helpful. And in the early days, I spent the majority of my time dealing with billing issues, right? And like checks that supposedly didn't come in the mail, invoices that didn't make it out. So we just made a hard stop. Like, if you want to work with us, we have a good reputation now. Unfortunately, this is the payment requirements, right?
No, totally makes sense. I'm curious. I think it's interesting that your status on an investor visa, which I learned today now exists, made you be creative and scrappy in some ways that you probably wouldn't have had to otherwise. Are there any other kinds of things that the peculiarity of kind of your situation has caused you to do differently that you've seen make an impact on your business?
Well, because of that, I would say you learn pretty quickly that a lot of success comes from basically necessity, right? So when you're scared to make that next hire or maybe add on a service or do anything like that, and when you make a next hire, it provides that necessity. So we push ourselves very hard, right? There's a lot of owners that, they don't have goals in place. They're not sure where they're going to be next month. When you put all of that in place and it becomes a necessity, sometimes you do have to take a little bit of risk to move forward, right? So, we just hired a new executive director, and it's going to cut into our margins and cut into our profits. But out of necessity, we have to grow, right? That's the only way that we're going to have a healthy business. So I would say forcing your hand a little bit. It's not about other people forcing it. It's like, where do you want to be and how hard do you want to push? Because if you put something like that in front of you, out of necessity that you have to grow. So, depending on what your goals are, make sure that you're challenging yourself.
That's a underreported value of the goals is you create these, you put structures in place that force your hand to adhere to those. And the result is that you have, sounds like much more significant growth than you would have if you'd not had those goals and those requirements in place. Well, that's good stuff. Okay, we're going to move to the next section. And this is about something that people value really highly in the industry and that you think's totally overrated, that it's not as good as it's cracked up to be. And so what do you think is overrated?
Well, even my team kind of disagrees with me on this, but it's taking bad cases. And by bad cases, I mean, maybe you have a referral source that refers to you all the time and they start referring you, 1-2 hour cases, right? They want 10 hours a week. They want 2 hours a day. They want a shower, it's not high level care. And a lot of people, and I was guilty of this early on in my agency as well, is you're taking anything and you're calling it marketing, right? You're like, if I take this, they're going to send me like all the referrals, after that. And I found that that's absolutely not true. They'll keep sending you those low hour and basically the referrals that you don't want in your agency. I'm not saying that, some people have systems set up to be able to manage referrals like that, but a lot of agencies, we have our 4-hour minimums, some have 8-hour minimums. And so don't sell yourself short, know your value. You shouldn't be providing free services and, you shouldn't be taking on clients that are going to be detrimental to your agency just for marketing purposes, right? And if you're saying no to some of these clients, it actually gives you a little bit of authority with your referral source. It's like, okay, well, these guys are like on the next level, and you train them on who you want them to send you, right? So I would really caution against that. I know it's hard, really early on in the agency, you're trying to gain traction, but things like that, when you have a bad case come on board, it can suck the resources out of your office. They're not profitable, and you basically don't maintain focus, right? If you're focused on getting your ideal client and that's going to meet your minimums and pay your rates, then you want to focus your time on that rather than trying to spend your energy on this case that doesn't even fit your strategy.
I love that. I have a couple of follow-up questions. The first is, how do I walk back if I have a referral source that is sending me low hour, poor quality clients, and I want to get out of that because I know everything about serving a 2-hour a day case is impossible, right? You've got caregiver challenges. Nobody wants to work that shift. You're not able to provide the level of value that you would for a more established client that's got requirements in line with what you do. So I'm in a position where I've been saying yes to those referrals from this particular source. How do I walk that back?
Yeah, so the first is educating them, right? There's 2 stages to that. So the first is re-educating them on it. Maybe you've already educated them once, but sitting them down, grab coffee or go into the facility or community and actually educate them on what a good referral looks like to you. And that's the number one most important thing. But the second part of that is sometimes it doesn't matter how much you educate them. They're going to send you those bad referrals. So the second part of that is to say no to those referrals. Say, I'm sorry, we do have that 4-hour minimum, and that's because we want to keep our quality level high. So that's the second part. And it's hard to do is saying no to those referrals. And after 1 or 2 you say no to, they get the point and they know that they're only going to send you those higher level referrals.
I would guess that there's some people listening to this who think, okay, if I put my foot down and I say no to some referrals from a particular referral source, why wouldn't they just stop referring to me altogether?
100%. And that is obviously, you can look at that as a risk, but I try and take the positives out of that because it does build your status as a higher level agency, and it builds authority, right? Because if you're saying no to them, they're not going to think like, oh, I hate this agency, I'm never referring to them again. They're going to think, wow, this is a higher level agency. We got to be sending them some higher level referrals. And, obviously that's not in every single situation, but I would say same thing. Just know your worth, right? You have those minimums in place for a reason, right? Not every home care agency has a 4-hour minimum just for the heck of it, right? It's because we can't reliably do 2-hour shifts, other than certain outside specialty scenarios, but it's just not possible for the quality, right? So what do you want to do? Do you want to just take anything and do as much volume as you can at a low margin? Or do you want to actually keep your quality level high? And that's what it takes, is saying no to the ones that are going to be a detriment to your quality.
Well, I think that's great advice. And I know people are always looking for better ways to work with referral sources. And so it sounds like one of the ways is to sometimes say no when you get the wrong kind of referrals.
Absolutely. No, you do have to train them as well. So,
well, we talked about a big mistake that you made. I want to hear about a little mistake that you see home care owners making all the time, that if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses 10 times better.
I think we touched on this a little bit actually, but most owners that I meet with, and even same thing, I was guilty of this early on, is not having any intention with what you're doing. You're just there existing, right? And you're hoping referrals come in, you're doing a bit of marketing, you don't have any goals, you don't have any structures in place. Make sure that you have intention and you know where you want to be. Because like I said, when you put those goals in front of you, or maybe you make a hire to try and hit your goals, out of necessity, you're going to grow a lot quicker, right? So just not having the intention and just making sure that you know your numbers and know your data. It doesn't mean if you're in your first year or not. So many owners I talk to, they can't answer what their weekly billable hours are and what their revenue was last year. And these are things that you absolutely have to know. So there's a few little things in there, but have intention and know your numbers.
So I'm an owner and I'm setting some goals for my agency. I want to do a much better job of tracking. I'm getting my data together. There's some tactical questions there. But I think the question I have for you is, how can I, as an owner, communicate effectively and get buy-in from the rest of my team around this vision, this intention for the agency?
Yeah, so what you want to do is obviously you want to reverse engineer it, right? So say you have a goal of $3 million this year, right? Or maybe in 2025, you have a goal of $3 million. So you reverse engineer that. Everybody in your agency, no matter how big your agency is going to play a part in that, right? So when you reverse engineer that as the owner, you're basically putting in place what needs to happen. How many referrals do I need? Are we going private pay? Are we going VA? So you reverse engineer that, and then you break it down per person in your agency, and you assign them accountabilities and tasks. And then you honestly meet about it, right? It shouldn't just be in your weekly meeting, just as a kind of a slough off thing. It's have an actual goal planning meeting and assign goals to each individual. And the most important part about when you sign goals to people, they're going to forget about them. They're not going to be sure about it. Whether you incentivize them or not, you have to monitor and stay on top of them. So you can pull somebody aside and say, hey, we're not on track for this goal. What's the problem? What do you need in place to be able to hit that goal? So reverse engineering that as the owner and then basically bringing that plan to the team is super, super helpful.
What have you seen work in terms of tying incentives or bonuses or things like that to these metrics that are assigned to particular people in the office?
Oh, there's so many different things you can do. So what I do, there's no specific ones that work better than others that I have found as far as your scheduler, your care manager. But the one thing that didn't work for us is definitely like caregiver bonuses. Is we started paying our caregivers very well. We started giving them $1 an hour bonus for when they were showing up to work. We found out that they just basically came to expect those bonuses, and the performance didn't improve. So that was one that definitely didn't work. But I will say, as far as the ones that work, the main thing is when I'm assigning incentives and bonuses and things like that, I'm looking at what we're not doing well. So maybe we have a lot of unassigned shifts every week, right? So it doesn't mean like you have to put incentives in place and that's how it is forever, right? Look at what you're struggling with. Each team member has their own weaknesses. And so identify those and then, obviously take like the top 3 or whatever and incentivize those and try and get them up to speed on those incentives. So it's really kind of an evolving and variable thing.
This is a really interesting conversation, which is how do we create incentive programs that drive the right kind of behavior without inadvertently creating an entitlement program? And this is something that we think about all the time as it relates to caregiver engagement, caregiver rewards, is how do we incentivize fewer call-outs without making everybody feel like they get paid an extra $1 an hour just for showing up? And so one of the things that we've seen work effectively, and I'm hearing you're getting at with, these incentives don't have to be permanent, they're not evergreen, is these campaign specific, these time period specific kind of spiffs on a particular metric that needs help. An example of this is like, let's say we want to really improve the quality and the volume of referrals that come in. Okay, this month, we're going to 2x our referral bonus and we're going to track it and all that kind of stuff. From the office staff perspective, if we've got an unassigned shift problem, hey, this quarter, we want to really get our unassigned shifts under control. And if the team can hit this metric, then here's what that means. What I'm hearing you say is just because you're implementing that bonus, that incentive, that program for a limited period of time doesn't mean that the next quarter you also have to bonus people on % of unassigned shifts.
100%. You can have ones that are a year long, it's going to be throughout the year. And then if you're having challenges, you can do a 1-month incentive. And we have like an on-call team that helps out after hours and on weekends and things like that. One really simple thing that we do is we started tracking just errors. We have an error log. We do it for the office team and then also the on-call team. And we have an error log and we started tracking. And due to that, we started learning a lot about, different people and where the challenges were. And it was something that was so simple. So what we did was we started actually incentivizing just for the error log with especially the on-call team because they were having a lot of errors at that time. And the errors just dropped. We started incentivizing that and we're still incentivizing that now. That doesn't mean that it's going to be forever, but it really helped just improve that situation.
Yeah, it's really smart. One of the things that you said earlier is that you're very much a data-driven business owner and that's been really important to you. The mistake that it sounds like a lot of owners are making is not having goals, which also means not tracking these metrics. And so the undercurrent here is the power of your incentive program, it sounds like, is rooted in how well are you collecting this data? And, are you using that data as the source of truth to design and implement these incentive programs?
100%. Yeah, you don't want to be just blindly going in there and incentivizing things that are not going to improve the quality of your service.
Cool. Well, we talked about a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that we ran into along the way, but I always like ending on a high note. And so what's something that's happened lately in your business that you're really proud of?
Well, the Inc. 5000 list was a huge one. That was something we were super excited about, but I did already mention that, so I won't go into detail. But I would say hiring our executive director. That was a really strategic, and it's been about 8 months since I've been talking to her. We've sat down multiple times for multiple hours and really got a feel for that it was going to be the right fit or not. So I feel very confident bringing her on board to help out. And she's going to, the agency runs fairly well without me there. And I'm still there about 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. And with her coming in, the ultimate goal is going to be to step out completely. I'm still going to be an advisor and everything in that area. But I'm very, very confident in the decision because of the time that I put into making sure that she was the right fit and she was making sure that we were the right fit. And so, yeah, just having that confidence, I'm excited to bring her on board. It's going to obviously come at a big cost, but I'm fully confident in the decision. So I'd say that was definitely a big win because you don't want to be scared and, apprehensive about those things.
Yeah. 8-month hiring process is pretty crazy. That doesn't sound typical, but it sounds like there's really strong indications of really good mutual fit, that she knows that you guys are the right place for her.
Absolutely. And it wasn't a matter of like, I mean, caregivers, we throw out ads on Indeed and we bring them in and interview them right away. So what this was is I looked at, basically my Rolodex, right? I've been in this business for 7 years now. I've met everybody in the area, and I made a list of like who I thought would be a really good executive director. And that's what I do for sales as well, is I go after people. I'm not posting job ads. I try and find who I know and who I trust already that's going to be a good fit. And she was somebody that I had worked with a few years previous. She was the ED at an assisted living community. And so, yeah, that's how the conversation started. And as I spoke to her, it just seemed like her, with her experience, was just really going to fill a gap in my agency. So just being intentional about that too.
It's great. Using that network as the best source of candidates for these super strategic, really important. If she doesn't work out, you're going to be spending a lot more than 10 or 15 hours a week in your agency. And so it's a big investment, but it sounds like you've got enough track record there to feel really confident in that hire. I love it. Well, before we go to our last segment, Home Care Hot Take, where can people find you? What do you want to plug?
So if you're interested in learning just tactics and tips and whatnot, you can definitely just go on homecaremba.com and you can sign up for our newsletter. It's also on all of our social channels and everything. We got a ton of YouTube content. I'm starting to put out more. But I wanted to give your audience a special offer as well, with essentially the first 3 owners that have at least 5 clients. There's a 5-client minimum. I want to help implement them the profitable client pipeline, where we're teaching our VIP private pay strategies. And we're going to do that at an 80% discount. So if you just want to email me, hello@mastersofhomecare.com, the first 3 that are actually qualified and have those minimum of 5 clients will absolutely get you in the program right away.
Cool. Well, sounds great. Take advantage of that. We'll provide those details in the show notes as well. Justin, we're going to move to Home Care Hot Take, give you an opportunity to get on your soapbox and tell people what you really think. So first question I have is, one thing people get wrong about defining your ideal client is?
It's a little bit of a play off of what we talked about, but saying no to the clients that don't fit your agency.
One area to invest in to grow your business that people often forget about is?
Quality. Everybody's worried about bringing in leads, and they're focused a little bit on quality, but that should be your main focus, is making sure that you're doing a good job for your clients, because that's going to make a lot of other things easier as well.
This is a follow-up question to that. What are the key metrics that you're paying attention to that give you kind of bird's eye view of how are we doing with respect to quality?
I would say, like, when everything gets a little bit easier with that, we're looking at things like sales, right? I mean, your leads are going to increase, right? Because your reputation's a lot better. Word of mouth is extremely important in this industry because it's a trust-based industry. So it's going to make sales and leads coming in a lot easier on your sales team, but also every position in your agency as well. Scheduling's going to be a lot better because you're not going to be having those constant call-offs. You're still going to have some inherently, you're always going to have some, but you can really reduce that number. So their care management, the same thing. You're not dealing with angry clients. You're not having to call caregivers. So it helps out a little bit in every different area in the business.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And then what are the things that you're looking at to know whether or not you're hitting quality or not?
Well, you basically just looking at your overall numbers, right? Because something like that touches so many different areas. There's not like one metric you look at. You look at, basically your client satisfaction would be kind of your number one right at the start, is making sure you're sending out forms and surveys and you're getting that information from the clients. So that's going to ultimately be kind of your number one thing. But then trickling down, you're looking at KPIs for all your other positions as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. One thing that you've done that's significantly improved retention for your business
is looking just outside the box a little bit. Anybody that knows me, we obviously do like the VIP private pay clients. So our rates are a lot higher than other agencies. We have little add-ons and things that we have in there to increase our revenue. So what we're doing is it allows us to invest a lot more in our caregivers, not just recruiting and spending money on ads or anything like that, but building out that culture and paying them well and putting them on benefits programs. It provides the revenue to really be able to do that. So I urge agencies to think that there's a lot of agencies that you're just competing with other agencies. You're all paying the caregivers the same thing. You have nothing to really differentiate yourselves. So you have to look at some of the other levers that you can pull. And one is obviously, your client rates, right? You can't, if you're running the same rates and the same pay rates and everything as every other agency, it's going to be really hard to differentiate, right? So I would say think outside the box and look at some of those other levers.
Yeah. What's the benefit that you've provided to your caregivers that they like the most? And then is there a benefit that you've provided that you thought was going to be great, but that they actually didn't like that much?
Well, I would say that the $1 per hour bonus would be kind of the main thing that I thought that would really trigger some better performance, and it definitely did not. And so what we did, and this is kind of interesting, we pulled the $1 per hour bonus program. We got a money booth, one of those ones where they blows up the money and they can catch as much as they want to. And they absolutely love it. We video it. We're going to start posting. It's very new. We're going to start posting it on social media and everything for the caregivers. But when you look at actually the cost differential in that, it's an extreme difference, right? You're only at about 5% of what you were paying before in the $1 per hour bonus. So it's something like that's fun and exciting, and also that you can use for marketing to your caregivers.
The money booth. It's a new one for me. I love it.
I'll send you a video.
Yeah, please do. Justin, thanks so much for making the time to come on today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. Thanks, David.
On behalf of the team here at Ava, thanks for listening to our show. We'll be back next week with another episode. So make sure you subscribe wherever you listen. If you have feedback on the show, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or send us an email to podcast@joinava.com. Thanks. And remember, the year may be 2024, but hindsight is always 2020.